I'm really super excited for tonight. We're going to be kicking off with my buddy Darin Ingels, and I'm going to unmute him and get his video going up here as we introduce him. He's a naturopathic physician. Anybody who follows me regularly knows Dr. Darin and I do a lot of work together. We're both seeing a lot of Lyme and autoimmune conditions. Darin also sees a lot of autism. His approach really has a lot to do with prevention and recovery using a lot of the self-care activities and food modalities that we talked about earlier this week, but also, you know, just super in-depth knowledge of herbs and medications. And as an added bonus, he's actually a microbiologist prior to becoming a naturopathic physician. So Dr. Darin Ingels, I'm super excited to be hanging out with you, brother. And what's going on? Welcome.
Well, you can see I've got this beautiful ocean behind me.
You get a new green screen?
I got a beautiful new green screen, so I'm like so happy the way my office is an absolute mess. So I'm too embarrassed to turn my virtual background off. So,
oh my goodness.
You know, it's funny. You know, I live here in Southern California, where I think getting outside, getting fresh air and vitamin D is so helpful for the immune system, and yet our government has willfully told us we can't go to the beach. They've closed all the beaches here, so we just have to enjoy it virtually now or do a drive-by. So today was actually a beautiful day. I did go sit out in the sun for about 20-30 minutes today and just get some natural vitamin D. It's 75 and beautiful, so I recommend definitely as much as people can take advantage of the weather, depending on where you live. Get the forces of nature working for you.
Yeah, no doubt, man. It's amazing. It's like what a little bit of fresh air is doing. I mean, I think I've been saying since the beginning of all this, we need to get good sleep, but in order to get good sleep, we need to get up, get out in some fresh air to kick on our melatonin production, and just, move around a little bit, move the lymphatic fluids, and get out and just enjoy. It's so much more quiet outside,
Exactly. Well, I think, you and I have talked about this before, and, you and I both work with Michael Burnoff, and I think, the language that we're using right now is really important. And the thing that we keep seeing blasted on the media is, that we're in lockdown. We're in lockdown. Very few places in the world are truly on lockdown. We're in shelter in, which is, you're being asked to stay home unless it's really necessary. But that doesn't mean you can't go out in your backyard. That doesn't mean you still can't walk in your neighborhood as long as you're social distancing. So I think, as much as we can use the things that we have available to us to our advantage, again, I think a lot of us have been afforded the time to actually take advantage of that. So that means, be with your kids, be with your family, be with, whoever's in your immediate environment, and, take that opportunity to, work on health, work on wellness. I think, Dr. Walls talked a little bit about this the other night as well, that, we've got a lot of things that are at our fingertips that don't cost any money, that we can still use to help improve our overall health and wellness. And, we've now been afforded that time where, we all complain about time, right? We just never have enough time to do this, time to go to the gym, time to do that. Well, most of us have been afforded that time. So why not take advantage of it? So I've been recommending, again, get outside, get some fresh air, get some vitamin D. If there's that exercise thing that you've been wanting to start, now you've got time to start it. So why not?
It's really interesting to me because, I'm talking to you, I'm talking to Terry, we're talking to, Cynthia Thurlow and all the other guests. And we have all these experts in nutrition and supplements and medicine, yet they all are telling us to just chill out and go outside and enjoy ourselves and take a break.
Yeah, look, I think, nutritional supplements definitely have their place. Like I said, I'm a naturopathic doctor by training, so I know a lot about herbs and, nutrition. I mean, are there things that we can do to help improve our health? Absolutely. When it comes to COVID-19, because this is such a new thing, we really don't know what the best things are. We know that there are certain things that we do for viruses as a whole. This is a novel virus. It's new. Does it behave the same way as other viruses? No, we honestly don't know. So I think a lot of us are making our best educated guesses of what we think are going to help help people, get through this, either prevent it from getting infected in the first place, or if you've been infected, hopefully nip it in the bud before it becomes more serious. In reality, you know, we don't really know what these things are outside of these small handful of studies that have been done with something like IV vitamin C. You know, there's a couple of, you know, small drug studies. In terms of nutrition, I've yet to see actually a single study outside of the IV vitamin C that's been done looking at, you know, is there an amino acid? Is there a vitamin? Is there an herb that's really going to be effective against this virus? And the God's honest truth is we really don't know. But I think what you're hearing, you know, from the previous 2 nights and what you're going to hear again tonight is that, you know, we have an opportunity to take stock of our health. And ultimately, it's about keeping yourself healthy. And I'm really hoping what will come out of all this is that it's a wake-up call to everybody that, you know, don't wait for a pandemic to go, wow, my health isn't as great as it could be. And now I'm maybe at risk, because we know that all these comorbid factors are, you know, in 90% of these cases, a cofactor in why people have gotten very serious illness with COVID-19. So if you're overweight, if you're diabetic, if you're on immune suppressive medication, if you've got certain autoimmune diseases, you know, there's a pretty long laundry list of things that predispose people to, you know, this virus. And I will argue, again, as a microbiologist, you know, we're talking about COVID-19 because it's the thing that's out there now. But if you are at risk, you're at risk all the time. You know, there will be another virus. I can promise you, this is not the last pandemic we're going to see, certainly in my lifetime. You know, we know from history, every 8-10 years, something else comes along. Now, sometimes it's a big deal. Sometimes it's not a big deal. I mean, if you look at when, you know, MERS came out in 2012, you know, there were 2,500 cases. You know, now we're up to 2 million with COVID-19. So, you know, it's a lot about perspective and context, but there will be something else that comes out. So, you know, I'm hoping, again, this will be a wake-up call for people that, you know, it's about what you put in your mouth, how you maintain your lifestyle, do you move your body? And there's a reason we're all talking about this, because this isn't just about dealing with COVID-19. It's really about getting your body healthy to the point that it will stave off these things naturally.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting too, because like Dr. Walls wrote a book on how to reverse MS. And the primary thing are 2 things: food and, you know, moving and exercise. And then you wrote a book on healing Lyme and autoimmunity. And if I'm not mistaken, food and moving are really high on your list of things to do, you know. And, you know, we've talked a lot about the ACE2 receptors. We hear all this in the media. Do we want it low? Do we want it high? Does it, now we're talking about ACE2 exhaustion and all this. And it
Right.
sounds like for normal optimal immune function, you know, our ACE2 levels, at least in our blood, we want to have relatively high, not, you know, and then it just so happens that regular aerobic exercise and plant-based whole food diet bump that up as well. So, I mean, what does this diet exercise thing have to do with health?
Well, you know, there's so many, you know, mechanisms about how viruses enter your body that, you know, every virus is a little bit different. And I'll use influenza as a great example. You know, influenza uses a molecule called ICAM1. It's an attachment molecule to the outside of your cell. So a lot of us naturally express this on our cell surface. It's not abnormal, but that's the entry point for this virus to get into the cell. And all these different viruses out there need an entry point to get into cells. And with, you know, the SARS-CoV-2, you know, this ACE2 receptor seems to be that entry point. So, you know, we will get, you know, scientists out there, research will get into the mechanistics of, you know, are there ways we can manipulate these receptors, manipulate these outer surface proteins to maybe prohibit these viruses from entering. But again, you know, you can look at any virus, Epstein-Barr virus, flu virus, cold virus. You know, why could you put 100 people in a room, expose them equally? Some people get ill and some people don't. Right. So it's the same thing we're seeing with this current virus. And why do some people get exposed, get very sick? Some people get minor cold symptoms. What's the difference? Now, again, I'm oversimplifying this by a ton, but to a certain degree, I think we could argue that your health status going into that exposure probably plays a pretty significant role. And again, just looking at the stats so far, again, we're seeing the overwhelming majority of people who've certainly been hospitalized, put on ventilators, and died. Most of them have had some sort of underlying health condition. So I think what we're really talking about is how do we keep you from getting to that point?
Yeah, you know, and I think that I've been trying to make the point to every audience I can speak to. We've got really two things we're dealing with. We're dealing with a virus, and we're dealing with and the virus needs a host because it can't replicate on its own. And let the scientists and the researchers talk about this. But what you're saying, we're not going to really know much about this COVID-19, you know, the SARS-CoV-2 virus for a really long time. We're going to hypothesize, but we're not going to really know. But what we know is we have a lot of research on what we can do to change the host. And that's so empowering because I have the opportunity to actually make myself the world's worst viral host.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I mean, so if I were to put something into my diet or take something out of my diet, what might that be? I mean, are there any like top 2-3 things I really need to be thinking about? And then I want to ask you the same question about, you know, herbs and stuff, because I know a lot of people have questions about what should I be taking if I want to boost up my immune function.
Yeah. Well, in terms of diet, you know, I think if we look at things that either help your immune system or work against your immune system, I have to laugh. I saw a post on Facebook today. You know, I've been trying to stay off Facebook because it's just at the point where it's so annoying that there's so much conflicting information. Of course, everyone now is a COVID-19 expert, but the dietitians of Canada actually posted this. They're actually advising people to stop believing that you can change your immune system with diet. They said there's no evidence you can boost your immune system with diet. And one of my colleagues who's Canadian posted it, and I can't believe an organization like that can make such a statement when we have so much research about how diet influences your immune system, particularly those parts of your immune system. So we're talking about NK cells, natural killer cells, or T cytotoxic cells. These cells are the cells that when they see something foreign, they go directly after it, eat it, and get rid of it before it becomes a problem. So that's the part of the immune system we really want to engage. We want to make sure it's working at its best. And again, we have a lot of evidence in the literature that this does happen. So in terms of what not to eat, that's the easy stuff. Stop eating crap. I mean, it's that simple. Stop eating junk food. And, you know, I think what's made the situation worse for so many people is we're more or less stuck indoors. We're bored. You know, we've got all the wrong reasons to eat. And I've been just as guilty of it. I'm fine. I'm eating more. In fact, one of my patients came in the other day and he's like, "Oh, Dr. Ingels, I can see you put on some weight." I'm like, "Gee, thanks."
Thank you so much. Thanks for noticing.
But, you know, it's like, I mean, I'm no different. I mean, we're all, you know, we're not as active, many of us, as we were prior to for any number of reasons. Again, I think, you know, we still have the power to control that. But to a certain degree, again, a lot of us are, you know, eating in ways that we don't typically do for any number of different reasons, but we can still make choices. I remember when this whole thing first came out, it was amazing. Went to the store. If you went to Trader Joe's or Whole Foods, wherever you shop, it's like all the junk food aisles were cleaned out. Yet all the fresh produce, fresh fruits, their aisles were perfectly filled and fine. So clearly what people were stocking up on was not the healthy stuff.
Right. You know, like when this all started, Darin, I mean, everybody's like, I can't find the food I need. And people are sending me photos of cleared off shelves, like you just said. But for me, we went to the store. We found everything we always need.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything that I eat was there. I didn't have a problem at all, with the exception of maybe one or two. Like I couldn't find salt. Salt, just plain old salt. Salt was cleared out. So why we needed to binge on salt, I have no idea. But that was one of the few things that was sold out. But otherwise, all the other fresh food was there. So I think, again, we can make that choice to eat healthy food, or we can make a choice to eat junk food. And this is a good opportunity to start making some of those changes. You know, the other things I think people tend to, you know, over consume are the sugary drinks, whether it's soda, you know, diet soda, any of that kind of stuff. You know, even some of the teas and these pre-made drinks that are just loaded with sugar. We've got just mounds of research how sugar impacts your immune system, and it's not in a good way. So if you want to really suppress your immune system, eat a ton of sugary foods. So all the sugary drinks you can very easily eliminate. You know, water is the one fluid your body needs. So drink water. And, you know, get into the habit of drinking water, get your kids in the habit of drinking water. Exactly. You know, this is a coffee cup, but it's filled with water.
Cheers to everybody out there.
You know, we know that your hydration status, and it's interesting, one of the proposed mechanisms with, you know, entry of COVID-19 is your hydration status. If the mucous membranes get really dried out, does it make it easier for the virus to enter? Now, we don't really know. It's been proposed, but it makes a lot of sense that, the more sort of moisture, because you've got a layer of mucus that lines your membranes, that's a protective layer. It keeps it from getting deeper into the tissue. So the more you hydrate yourself, the more you build that layer, and it just makes it one more barrier for that virus potentially to get in you. So again, hydration,
Right.
really important.
It's always really interesting. It's like we dive in these conversations and we keep saying we're going to talk about what herb to take and what this and that, but we always go back to optimizing your body's, self-healing mechanism and self-protective mechanism.
Yeah.
Seems like Mother Nature knows best.
Mother Nature really does. So, in terms of foods like not to eat, I think those are kind of at the top of my list. In terms of what you should be eating, again, my feeling is the less hands that touch the food, the better. So, organic as much as possible, locally grown as much as possible, in season as much as possible. I'm pretty fortunate that I live in California because we grow just a ton of stuff here and things don't have to come very far to get here. So almost all the fresh produce we get is locally sourced. So we're pretty fortunate that way. Other people live in areas where that's not as accessible, but to the best that you can. And again, I think, certain foods that, we know really help support the immune system. I'm a huge fan of mushrooms. I personally can't stand mushrooms. I don't like the taste and the texture.
Oh, you're like Jill. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the squishy, texture, I'm not a fan of. But again, when you look at the health benefits, we know that, they're major promoters of NK cell, natural killer cell activity. So things like shiitake, maitake, reishi, you can go buy these mushrooms at the store and just incorporate them into your cooking. So you don't have to go take a pill of mushrooms to get the benefits. We know that a lot of cruciferous vegetables, things like garlic. Garlic is a natural antimicrobial. It helps improve blood flow. It helps with inflammation. So we get these health benefits by eating literally one little clove of garlic, not the whole bowl, just one little clove a day can give you those health benefits. So adding in those other cruciferous vegetables like, broccoli and cauliflower and Brussels sprouts, all of these things help with, liver detoxification. So, we've got these, these superfoods, if you want to think of them that way, that help a lot with our detox pathways. They do actually help boost your immune system. So again, if we can get these through food, why not?
Right on. So we're going to try to get it through our food, and and some of us are changing our habits, so we're using this time to motivate ourselves. What about, like, let's say that, like, we're working on that, but we're not the biggest veggie eaters at the moment, or maybe we are, because like for me, like I'm doing a lot of extra work, I'm still exercising, I want to just take a little extra precautions. If I'm going out there, are there like a top 2 or 3 herbs that I might want to consider, or other natural substances as a supplement? And are there any that you would say just steer clear of? Because I mean, like you said, we've all seen it on, there's so many things online about the latest, greatest cure, and medicine or herb, we know there's not really great studies at the moment, but from a background of naturopathic medicine and all your knowledge of the past, what worked for past viruses, what might you be thinking about?
Well, I think from a nutrition standpoint, our nutrients we know help support the immune system. Now, again, this is just sort of generalized immune support. We have no idea how much with the current virus it does or does not help. But vitamin C, again, I think, we've got tons of research on vitamin C's ability to help support your immune system. So even oral vitamin C can be very helpful. Vitamin A, I think, is terribly helpful because vitamin A actually helps increase what's called secretory IgA. So IgA is an immune molecule that lives in your mucous membranes. So it really is your first line of defense when you get exposed to anything that comes through something you breathe in or something you ingest. So increasing your IgA levels is a great way to, again, to help support your immune system. Vitamin D, again, tons of research on vitamin D as an immune modulator, helping shift your Th1, Th2 balance so that you get maximal Th1. Again, that's that immune fighting aspect of your immune system. And again, knowing that most, certainly Americans, tend to be vitamin vitamin D deficient anyway, having a little extra vitamin D on board. And again, we've got some pretty interesting evidence coming out with zinc, very specifically with COVID-19. It's been part of at least a couple of the small studies that have been done in conjunction with other, medications. But, zinc is, again, been known for a long time that, again, helps support the immune system and itself inhibits viral replication for some viruses. Again, we don't know about SARS-CoV-2, but it's reasonable to, I think, add zinc so that vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, and vitamin A has been my go-to with my patients just to help keep their immune system healthy. I put a lot of my patients on that just in the cold and flu season just to keep their immune system primed. And for people who've got a history of, having repeated, colds and flus, by and large, most people actually do pretty well with that protocol. In terms of herbs, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say one other before, and herbs is where I was going to go in a minute too, but what about quercetin? Just because everybody's talking about hydroxychloroquine, and chloroquine might be zinc ionophores, meaning they pull zinc into the cells, so it works better. Naturally, I heard quercetin can do it. Have you been thinking about that? Is the research really there, or is it just kind of like social media blitz?
Yeah, I think it's more social media blitz. Again, I'm not aware of any research specifically with quercetin and that activity. My speculation, if it does help, the amount of quercetin you would have to take would probably have to be pretty high. And, when you look at doses of quercetin, because we use quercetin for allergies, it's a really good mast cell inhibitor. The doses we use for that are probably much less. So again, we don't really know what the target dose would be for quercetin. So that hasn't really been something that's been on my radar. I think there are other nutrients that probably are more efficient and work better. But I mean, if you're taking quercetin for other reasons, I certainly don't think it's harmful.
Right. And so a couple questions are popping up. One about elderberry, and I think I want to make sure we keep some time. That's a really good one. Could you quickly say, generally, what would you generally recommend for zinc and vitamin A in terms of doses?
Yeah, so for adults, for vitamin A, it's very safe to take upwards of 25,000 IUs a day. There is potential toxicity with vitamin A. However, if you look at the research, they've done studies where they've given 150 to 250,000 IUs for 2.5 years to young adults with no signs of toxicity. But, if you start getting a headache, fatigue, joint pain, or really dry, flaky skin, that can be a sign of vitamin A toxicity, in which case, if you just lower your dose or stop it, it will go away completely. So again, I've never seen toxicity at 25,000 IUs a day, but I think it's a good dose. And when you look at vitamin A, make sure it's actually vitamin A. A lot of supplements, when they sell it, it'll say vitamin A, and you look at the label, it says in parentheses, as beta carotene. Beta carotene is technically two vitamin A molecules joined together, but they're not the same. And your body dissociates very little beta carotene into vitamin A. So if you're going to use vitamin A, actually get pure vitamin A. And you can find it through most retailers. Right. And zinc for an adult, anywhere from 30 to 50 milligrams a day is appropriate. Again, with zinc, make sure if you're going to take it with a full stomach or full meal. Zinc on empty stomach can make you very nauseous. And if you start taking zinc long-term, it can deplete copper. So if I have someone who's on zinc long-term, I do like to test their blood for zinc and copper levels and just make sure we accidentally don't start upsetting the balance.
Right. So basically, like vitamin D, vitamin A, and zinc, vitamin C in sort of standard doses are going to be safe long-term for most people, with the caveat that with zinc, we're going to want to keep an eye on the copper.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I think, at 30 milligrams a day, again, depending on where you live in the world, like where we live out here and in Arizona, the copper is actually very high in the soil. When I lived in Connecticut, it was the same thing. So I never saw copper deficiency because it was just naturally in the soil. People were getting it through their local food. But it's a good idea, again, if you're going to be on for probably more than 4 to 6 months, you might want to start checking your levels and just make sure that the balance is okay.
And then, so what about elderberry?
So elderberry, this created a
cytokine storm, dude. You're going down.
Yeah, this is a gross misunderstanding. And for people who don't really understand herbs, they sort of there was one small study that found that elderberry increased IL-6, interleukin-6, which is a pro-inflammatory cytokine. When you are sick, you want pro-inflammatory cytokines. It is part of your immune system's ability to fight the infection. That itself isn't a problem. And elderberry actually has a bigger effect on tumor necrosis alpha, which is a different molecule. So elderberry is really what we call, again, an immune modulator. If things are too low, it brings it up, and if it's too high, it brings it down. There is zero evidence, zero, that in any human study ever, that elderberry causes cytokine storm.
Right.
Now, I know Stephen Buhner, who's a well-known herbalist, he's advocating not to use elderberry syrup, which is the form that most of us use it in, as a treatment for SARS-CoV-2. We have no idea if it helps or doesn't help. He's actually recommending using the leaf. We rarely use the leaf, and most commercial elderberry products are elderberry syrup. My feeling is, as a preventive, elderberry syrup is fine. And because it has so many other effects for other viruses, I think as a preventive, it's fine. If someone actually does come down with SARS-CoV-2, would I use it? Probably not. I don't think A, it's going to be strong enough, and B, we've got no evidence it's going to help at that stage or not. But if someone is taking elderberry on a regular basis just to help maybe prevent getting sick, I think it's very reasonable. But this whole thing about causing cytokine storm is a very, very rare condition. And yes, Dr. Song, I know she wrote a really good article about this that kind of explains it in more detail. So please check out her article. But again, cytokine storm is extraordinarily rare. And, even for the people who are in the hospital and on ventilator, not all of them are there because of cytokine storm. Some are and some aren't. So. Well,
I just want to throw, as someone who's spent a large part of their career in the critical care unit and in emergency rooms, that we have to be really clear. We're talking about two different types of patients here.
Yeah.
Vertical patients and horizontal patients. And vertical patients, meaning most of us listening here, I hope. And if anybody is supine and in a hospital bed, we're sending out love and healing vibes to you. But the bottom line is, when you're a vertical patient, you don't have cytokine storm, and you're not even remotely close to it. I mean, this is a semi-rare event in the critical care unit. There are a bunch of questions about pediatric doses. I'm going to drop in and unfortunately, there's so many things we can talk about. I'm going to drop in an article that Dr. Song just shared with me that she wrote that has some of those dosages. So, any other herbs, Darin, that you're finding really kick butt?
Yeah, so my favorite herb is called Gravis. Gravis is a well-documented.
Taking that.
Yeah, it's well documented against several viruses, including Epstein-Barr virus. We use it for rhinovirus, which causes the common cold. It's been a very effective herb. And it's funny because all of the companies that we work with that make Gravis, they're all like completely sold out now. So you probably have a hard time finding it. But Gravis is one I do recommend to keep on your shelf. It's a great go-to for anyone in the family that just gets a cold or any kind of flu-like symptoms. It can at least help shorten the course in my experience. So I'm a huge fan of Gravis. I'm also a huge fan of an herb called Lomatium. Lomatium is one of our more potent viral or antiviral herbs. The thing about Lomatium is, and that's Lomatium, Lomatium has a component in it that can cause a little bit of a skin rash. So if you're using like a tincture form of it, just be a little bit careful. It does happen up to like 40% of people who use the herb, so it's a pretty high number. It's not dangerous, it's just annoying. There is a company called Eclectic Institute that makes a Lomatium isolate, where basically they've taken the herb, took that one component out that causes the skin rash, and they just reformulate it without that component. And I've used that for years. And again, I find when people use that at the very onset of any kind of viral illness, it nips it in the bud usually pretty quickly. The other herb that I'm a big fan of is called astragalus. So astragalus, different than Gravis. Astragalus is used a lot both in Western and Chinese medicine. And astragalus is a way of, again, helping basically boost your immune system. It does have a little bit of antiviral activity, but it probably has more of an impact again on NK cells and T cells. And again, even some of the medicinal mushrooms that are out there, so things like, cordyceps, maitake, all of these help increase NK cell activity. So again, that's, some of these aren't directly antiviral, but the fact that they can help support your immune system, hopefully clear the virus faster, I think all of them are pretty helpful.
Awesome. One other quick question too is, what about, what are your feelings about like herbal infusions? I mean, a lot of people are making teas and stuff, and I think Buhner talks about a lot of this stuff. I mean, is that something that you're doing a lot of, or?
It really depends on the herb. Some herbs get extracted better as a tea, where, you like most teas, you steep it in warm water for, 10 minutes. Some are better as tinctures. Some are actually better as capsules. So andrographis, because you can standardize it to a certain percent of what's called andrographylide. It's one of the active components. I think that's more effective than having it as a tea or tincture. And some of these herbs are very bitter, so they're just like, something like frankincense or myrrh, they're really good for the immune system, but they taste horrible. So, those, if you ever take them, you would want them in capsule. So, I think you have to kind of know what the herb you're dealing with. The lomatium that we use is in a tincture form. Astragalus I've used as both capsules and tincture form. Again, you can get them as raw teas. By and large, most raw teas aren't quite as potent as tinctures or capsules. But again, it really depends on the herb. Now, echinacea, which I don't necessarily recommend for this, but echinacea is actually best as a tincture, much better than a capsule or a tea. So just depends on the herb.
Awesome. Darin, this is amazing, and we could do this forever. We might have to come back and talk more about these at some point. Lots of questions coming up. I know everybody, just as a reminder in the chat, we sent you the pediatric dosing and some of the pediatric herbals you can use from Dr. Song. Certainly, Dr. Darin Ingels has an amazing book called The Lyme Solution. It actually will tell you a heck of a lot more about what's going on in the herbs and healing autoimmune conditions. We're not going to have time to jump, I don't think, tonight in the essential oils. Dr. Song talked a little bit about it last night. And then also keep an eye on your emails, because I do have someone who wants to do like a Facebook Live or another webinar specifically on the essential oils. So Darin, one last thing is, I appreciate all the extra time. I just want to ask you about vitamin C, because that came up and I know everybody's asking, like, whole food vitamin C supplements versus synthetic C. Do you have a quick thing to send us out?
The bottom line is vitamin C is vitamin C is vitamin C. I think it's a marketing thing that some companies, that it's food-based vitamin C. The molecule of ascorbic acid is exactly the same. There are some cases where there is a synthetic molecule that is biochemically different than its natural form, and that is not the case with vitamin C. So my feeling, if it's food-based, it's great. If it's, synthetic, and synthetic isn't really synthetic. Synthetic doesn't mean that you made it chemically, that it's often synthetic just means it's extracted from a different source. So chemically, it's the same exact molecule your body sees when you eat oranges. So I'm not concerned.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, I have to hit you for one more, because Dr. Song, who's been such a big part of our community and this mini series, said, is there any specific things you're doing for pandas and PANS patients?
Well, again, I know we have very limited time, so the bottom line is yes. I have a lot of my PANS and PANS patients on extra doses of vitamin A. For people who are my patients, I actually use doses that are much higher than I just suggested, but because I monitor them. Vitamin A, there's a whole vitamin A protocol that Dr. Usman recommends for PANS, that it's a short-term 2-3 day, very high doses of vitamin A. You do have to monitor it, so I wouldn't recommend that you just do this on your own unless you're under the guidance of a physician. But the high-dose vitamin A actually works pretty well for trying to control it. And again, all the other things we talked about just for helping their immune system, because any kind of microbial exposure does tend to set off PANS and PANDAS. So whether it's a cold virus, coronavirus, it doesn't matter. So again, it's still ultimately about keeping their immune system healthy. And so that's kind of been my approach, and it's very specific to the individual. So, but the high dose vitamin A has been something that's been pretty consistent with most of my kids.
Right on. And so maybe what we can do, guys, is we'll get together with Dr. Darin and Dr. Song and do a little something fun extra on PANS and PANS. And I did, for the chat, put it up there: pediatric acute onset neuropsychiatric syndrome, a type of autoimmune encephalitis. And really, it's a lot like this, and we need to what we need to do is really modulate the immune system, keep it in balance, have it functioning optimally, but not too much. And that's like a whole nother like week-long course. But Dr. Darin Ingels, thanks, brother. We'll do this
All right.
again soon.
Thanks, Tom.